Hello, it is July the 11th, it is 2026, and I'm feeling like telling you a story about being a teenager in New York City a long, long time ago. Um, my family came from Canada immediately before we came to New York, and we arrived in the United States in March 1960. Um, Kennedy was the new incoming president at the time. And I have to tell you, when I first saw Manhattan from a Greyhound bus as we were traveling cross country, I got so excited just seeing this incredible quantity of lights in the distance. They just went on forever and ever. They just didn't seem to stop. And I was 12, peering out through the darkened bus windows into the night, and I could not believe this entire amazing display of lights in the distance that was New York City. And so my dad, who had been trained as a chef in Germany, was a cab driver and did other things in Canada. And then he turned into a building superintendent in New York. And thanks to his job, we ended up moving from the Bronx to Queens to Long Island to Brooklyn to Manhattan, all in 4 years' time, as his boss moved him into ever bigger and bigger and fancier buildings. So we ended up in downtown Manhattan in the spring of 1964, and I was around 16 at the time that we moved there. My love for New York City just kept on growing. There was nothing about New York I actually didn't like, especially as a teenager without a car initially. I especially loved the subway system. It could take you from one end of New York to the other and into the boroughs, all for 10 cents. I mean, that was the fare back in the 1960s, right? And I loved being on the subway and did not find it frightening. I found it interesting, except for when I had to go to school and men pressing up against me early in the morning. That part wasn't too much fun. But we lived like 3 blocks from Central Park, and I had a cat that I took to the park on a leash. I had a sketch pad with me. I would sit there and sketch things. New York, New York Central Park is really a big deal for the city, and it's well used. It's well used by the people of the city. I mean, they in their on their bikes. In the winter, there's a little ice skating rink there. During most of the summer, there is Shakespeare plays in the park free of charge. You just have to get into really long lines early in the day to get tickets to that. There is a lake on which you can row. I did that with my mom in 1964. It was the year of the World's Fair, and my mom was afraid of water and drowning, so we had to row very, very gently for her. But that was a fun thing. And of course, the stores in New York, right? I mean, I was particularly fond of Bloomingdale's and the Bloomingdale's soap that they had. And then I worked, my first job ever was at Macy's. I had been taking my dad's car out at night while he was asleep, teaching myself to drive in New York City at night. And then one day I decided to take it out during the daytime, and I got so nervous about it that I crashed into the garage wall down below in the building's basement. And I really worried about what my dad would say because he loved that car. It was a little Carmen Gear, a little sports car, a little two-seater with a little tiny seat in the back, and it was red with a black top. And he just absolutely adored that little car of his. And I drove it into the garage wall. And so he said, "Well, you better get a job and pay to have it fixed." And so I played hooky from school the very next day and applied at Macy's, and Macy's hired me. And then I have lots of stories about working at Macy's. They put me into a shoe department at one time, and this old gal, she had bought some really dainty slippers for a wedding. And you know, if you buy a pair of new shoes, something like that, You don't want to just wait until the day of the wedding to put them on. You better make sure that they're good for your feet. Anyway, this gal, she came back after the wedding apparently, and she complained. She said that the shoes were a bad fit. Well, when you looked at her feet, she had so many bunions. She looked like a thing of cauliflower on her feet. So I don't know why she ever thought she should be wearing these dainty little slippers. And I am quite certain I was not sufficiently sympathetic that it was the fault of the shoes and not the fault of the feet that caused the problem for her. And she told me to go back to wherever the hell I had just come from. That was not the first time I heard that at Macy's, but that was part of the fun of working at Macy's in the 60s. I also worked for Vintage Wines. They were an import company of the finest wines and spirits, and I was taking telephone orders from the salesmen. We had salesmen all over the place out there, and um, every Friday afternoon we would get to sample another one of our products. And Lancer's Vin Rosé. I mean, I can't even remember the names of these really, really fancy wines. They were really expensive too. And that was fun. That was a lot of fun, being able to work in a place like that. Uh, and then the school I attended an all-girls school, Julia Richmond, and it was a big school. It took up an entire block from like First Avenue to Second Avenue, and then like from 54th to 55th Street, something like that. I may be getting the blocks wrong now, but it was an enormous school, and I became the art editor of the school's art literary magazine, The Bluebird, and that was great for me. And I mean, the museums in New York, right? The Metropolitan with miles and miles and miles of art. MoMA had a gigantic exhibit of Monet's water lilies, which was my favorite room at the MoMA Museum, and the Guggenheim, and the Museum of Natural History with the mummies and the tombs and the skeletons and the dinosaurs and the. Of course, there's also the opera, there's music, and then there was Chinatown. I remember that I would go to Chinatown in the evening after dinner hour, so it wasn't that busy, and I would be eating that food on my way back home in the car, which was, kind of messy, but uh, that was New York in the 60s. And then in 67, I left New York in 67 to join my husband in Fort Sill, and our son was born in 68 in Fort Sill. That was not so much fun anyway. That was the end of my being in New York City. And it was a great place to be a teenager. I can't think of a city that would be more fun than New York for a teenager. Back in those years, I don't know how much fun it would be now. It's a different city. I was there last in, I want to say 2018. Is that no? It had to have been 17 or 16. Anyway, the traffic was so horrible. It was just gridlock all day long. The theater district smelled of urine. I would go on early morning walks in the neighborhood of where I used to live, and that wasn't too far from Times Square. So I would walk through Times Square on my morning walks when I was there in 16, and it smelled horrific. Of course, the theaters were still wonderful, but just wanted to share that little piece of my life with you. What a fun trip New York City was at that time. I don't know what kids are doing nowadays. I mean, we didn't have cell phones, right? Television had a few shows. I think Leave It to Beaver, My Three Sons, Bewitched, Uncle Ed. I forget all of the crazy shows, but the Lawrence Welk show, I remember that one. Ed Sullivan, I remember that. And We think of it as the good old days nowadays, but I'm sure, there was plenty of grumbling back in the day about how risque these shows were becoming and how dirty New York was getting to be and how crowded. But for a kid, it was fun. It was really fun. So, wishing you a great week. Um, there are a lot of not so much fun things happening these days, but it is wise not to spend too much of your time focusing on the deck in the world, which is going to happen with or without you paying attention to it. I mean, it's good to know what's going on in the world, but don't make it a major part of your day to dive into the worst news on the planet. Give yourself a little break from that from time to time, and remember the beautiful things in life, of which there are still so many. Ciao.